So like she said, my name is Laura Carroll, and I teach at Paintsville Elementary, and I have third graders. And the title of my grant was Digitizing Guided Reading. One of the strategies I like to use in my classroom is like we'll have shared reading time where we're all reading the same grade level text and using those reading standards. But then I also like to have sort of a guided reading time where I meet with kids in small groups and we dig deeper into texts maybe more on their level, literature circles, things like that. So my current problem in practice is the lack of efficiency in assessing the guided reading process in my classroom. Likewise, I also lack diverse materials at the various levels I need in order to meet the needs of students in my classroom. So I had a lot of like chapter books that we used, but not as many resources for informational text, which is something that, the Common Core really hits hard. So it was also kind of hard to assess it. Especially like, if we finished reading a chapter book, our school got rid of AR and things like that. So those were some problems. So does a blended learning approach to literacy using a program that is more efficient increase students' reading map scores, common reading assessments, and K-Prep reading scores? So what I used for this grant was I got an Apple TV, a program called Raz Kids Plus, and some refurbished iPads. And so the idea was that when we met in small group, the students would be around the table and they would have their iPads, and whatever is on my iPad, for example, the program, you could select thousands and thousands of guided reading books, and they're all leveled. And so it's all you do is like you have a roster. And so, for example, we went to Carter Caves on a field trip. And so there was a really good high-level text about caves on the Raz Kids program. So all I had to do was assign it to my students. And that one was actually multi-leveled. So I kind of gave a harder, it was the same stuff, but it was on different levels. So I kind of was able to, diversify it that way, I guess. And so I assign it to all the students, and then I pull it up on my iPad, which mirrors on the Apple TV. And then as I flip the pages, the students are following along. They can take notes on their books, and they can highlight vocabulary words. They can put them in a gloss, their own little journal that they keep up with over the year. It will read it to them. It will also record them reading it, so you can listen to them read their, whatever text you've assigned to them. And it will also, it has a quiz over each book that you assign. So when you're done, you have them take the quiz, and it sends it to your computer, and you can kind of track that data pretty easily. So in the fall, I had most of my students were below level in reading. I had very, you can kind of see the light blue is the fall. Most of my students were below. I had a few on, and then none above level. So there was no light blue. So but by the spring, we were able to decrease the students who were below level in reading and get a lot on level, and then we actually moved some kids to above level. So, and the thing that also with the Raz Kids, so not only can I assign books, but every student is put on what I call a level up, and so they can read. They have their own little library of books, and it's all digital, so it's just like whatever they choose, and they read it. And then they have to, in order to complete that book, they have to read it, listen to it being read. I make them record them reading the book, so I know they're reading it, so I can go back and listen. And then they have to take the quiz and pass it, and then it'll check that book off. And there's like that whole library, for example, on level L, or if you're on level M, I've got some on level Z, or whatever. You just put them where they're at, and then they work to finish and get to the next level. And so in our room, if you get to the next level, we say you leveled up, and they can have lunch in the room for a week and watch a movie and that kind of thing. So it kind of motivates them to do the work. And some kids really bought into that, and they were just hitting their levels. And then you've got the kids that aren't going to, don't want to read unless they have to read. And it's kind of like that research says, the more you read, it's just like you can always tell. And so those students who bought in and read a lot, they really made a lot of gains in their MAP scores. So the mean RIT for reading at the beginning of the year was a 184, and at the end of the year, the mean RIT score was 203. At the beginning of the year, 10 students were identified as below grade level, and by the end of the year, there were only 4. But all 4 of those students showed major growth. So, for example, one of my students, she was at a 162 at the beginning of the year, and by the end of the year, she made it to a 190. But she's still considered below level because as you take it, you're the way MAP works, you're still, even though you've made great gains, if you don't hit where you should be at the end of the year, you're still considered below level. So, overall, I felt like I really like the program. I'll definitely buy it again. And those are some scores if you want to compare from fall to spring. I didn't mean fall 19, I meant spring 19. But I really like the program. I would recommend it. You can use it in many ways. So, any questions?